Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Dr. Claire Moon, and this is another question and response session, question and answer session about astrology. So welcome. If you're joining me, if you're joining me, you can look over to the right-hand side of your screen and you should see a chat there. You can hang out in there. You can definitely ask questions in there. Usually it's not too busy, so I should be able to see them without missing them. And just any old questions that you have about whether it's astrology technique, whether it is about, I guess, something going on in the sky right now. Sometimes I take personal questions, not usually, because I don't like to comment on someone's chart unless I see the whole thing, of course. So sorry if that's gonna be a problem. However, we're going to talk about a lot of stuff today. I actually did a call for questions this week and I got a ton of responses. So, I mean, we'll easily get through the hour. And then, of course, we'll still have time for anything that is peppered in. And if we don't get to everything, come back next month because I do this every second Thursday of the month at 7 p.m. Central Time. Same bat place, same bat channel. Here we are. Let me see if anyone is here. I don't think so. There is about a 20-second delay as well. So if you are commenting or asking a question, just know that it might be a minute before you see it. And I think that's all for my announcements. I guess if you're new, if you don't know who I am, hello. I never introduce myself. I never think to do it, but I'm an astrologer. I do readings for people all day long. I love my life. I love my job. So if you want to get a reading, if you like the style with in which I talk about things, if you like how I teach, I do mentoring and tutoring sessions as well. So whether you need a birth chart reading, forecasting for yourself, or you need help just learning the techniques, especially if you're into more Hellenistic astrology, this is the place. So my website is www.aligninglightastrology.com. You can check that out. And I have a newsletter. I usually have a discount code going. So if you sign up for my newsletter, I send out about one a month. It's usually after the sun goes into the next sign. I'll send that out and there's usually some kind of discount. So if the prices are like, whoa, too expensive, no problem. Usually have discounts. Secondly, I do have a sliding scale. So if you want to learn from me or read together with me, and funds are an issue, you can definitely check out my sliding scale. Additionally, if you're someone who has been, a victim of any kind of oppression, I have a long list of people who qualify for my sliding scale as my way of giving back. So I don't want money or anything to get in the way of astrology. And that's part of also why I do this for free. You can tip me, you can donate on my website. I think there's like the super stickers you can do here if you have that set up, if you're interested in that. No pressure at all. I don't do this for money, but if you feel like tipping me, of course, love it. Love to eat food and pay my rent. And then, I think that's it. I think those are all of the announcements. Um, I am going to get my software going here and we will start answering some questions. Oh, look at all these people. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Um, oh, welcome. We got new people too. We got Reverend Kai. We got some familiar faces, new friends, old friends. Hello. Hello. Okay. First question. Let's see here. Which one should I do first? I think I'm going to talk about Sect first. This won't take long at all. This one's a pretty straightforward thing. It's part of the doctrine of Hellenistic astrology is something called sect. So I guess in order to explain what sect is, we've got to know that this circle that we're looking at, that looks like just this abstract mandala. We have to know that this is a 3D sky that's been squished onto a 2D surface. And we can actually imagine that someone is here standing and we've got our horizon. That's what the AS, that stands for ascendant, DS stands for descendant. And we've got our horizon here and our relative, somewhat east where planets rise, the west where planets set. And this sets up the top of the sky. above that person's head from this view in the middle versus what's underneath their feet. And so right now, where I am at 7-ish p.m., Madison, Wisconsin, we've got the sun below the horizon. And so this person then is a night chart. Whoever was born right now, they are a night chart. The sun is below the horizon. That is what we mean by sect. Is the sun below the horizon at the time of birth, or is the sun above the horizon? So we can actually animate this and go back an hour or a few. And now we can see the sun is actually above the horizon up here. So someone born at 3 p.m. in my place, that they would be a day baby. So this changes how we start to determine how planets are behaving in the chart. So for instance, a day chart, Saturn is going to be more of a friend, and the biggest friend is going to be Jupiter. And in a night chart, it actually changes, and Mars is, in a day chart, Mars is the most difficult planet. In a night chart, Mars becomes more of a friend. Saturn becomes the most difficult one for night babies. And Venus is the best for night babies. So that is usually the first thing that Hellenistic astrologers would have looked at, just seeing, okay, when this event began, when this person was born, was the sun above or below the horizon? So that's sect. That's what we mean when we're talking about that. And if you've ever been in a consult with me, I'm always referring to everyone as day babies and night babies. So that's what I mean. All right. So thank you for Vince for that question. It's a really good thing to cover. It's super important. What can I say? Hello from Australia. Oh my gosh. It's like tomorrow there. Happy Friday to you. Who knew I'd be so entertained by time zones at some point in my life? Yeah, feel free. It's super casual, everyone. And if you've ever asked a question, you need not be present to win. I will still answer it. You don't have to be here. I will still answer it, and you can just catch it later because, of course, it's recorded. And you know, too, what I've been wanting to do, and okay, real talk. I'm so bad at, once I get into a routine, I'm good. But like, I'm sure people can relate. I definitely struggle with getting new routines started. And one of my new routines is actually doing a little meditation time during these moments of learning and just talking about astrology. So I've been stopping and doing just like a few minutes. If you don't feel like doing that, this is time to go get a snack. This will just take a few minutes, but I want to just have a little meditative moment so that we can ground a bit and yeah, just be present and maybe get a nice firm ground of nervous system regulation before we start talking about all these brainy things. And part of this is because I need it. If people haven't figured that out. So I've been pulling these cool cards out of this Roshi Joan Halifax deck in a moment, in a breath. And they're just these cute little prompts. So it makes it easy. So I don't have to use my brain. This one's called Ocean Mind, which of course I picked because the sun is in a water sign. The sun is in Scorpio. So why not? Let's do Ocean Mind. All right. You don't have to be necessarily seated or standing. You can be in any position for this, but probably not doing something. So if you're driving, I don't know if this is safe if you're listening to this and you're driving. But imagine that your mind is like the vast ocean. Waves arise and fall away. Currents play and pull on the surface. Deep down is stillness, movement and stillness. Rest openly in this fluid ocean mind. Waves arise and fall away. Currents play and pull on the surface. Deep down is stillness, movement and stillness. Rest openly in this fluid ocean mind. It's very nice. I like that. I like to think about my thoughts as water or a moving wave or things like that, because it is so movable and changeable, just like our thoughts. They're always coming and going. Thanks, everybody, for doing that with me. I appreciate it. And if you're ever looking at astrology and you're like, wow, this is alarming, as it will happen like that sometimes. Yeah, a good thing to do is to just come back to your senses, come back to the thoughts in your mind or the emotions or the breath or any kind of sensation that you're having. Taste, touch, smell. It's not always the move, but sometimes it's the move. And with that, let's go on to our second question. This is one I'm going to just kind of answer and put some resources below because I'm not an expert on it. But I got a question about if I use asteroids besides Chiron, like Juno or Psyche, or if I just use the main asteroid goddesses, Juno Ceres, Pallas Athene, and Vesta. And I just wanted to point people to some resources for asteroids that I like. And this is a moment too where we can crowdsource, which I like to do. Um, but I pretty much use just Chiron and the four goddesses mainly. I have like done the thing where you can look up, you know, I don't know, whatever asteroid is named like Harold or like whatever your ex's name is, and you can pull it up and be like, oh God, it's on my ascendant. It makes sense. It seems to work. So I definitely have done that. It tracks. It works. It's weird. And I think I failed to actually put it in the show notes below, but I will after the live. I'll put it in the chat. Let me see here. And then, oh, so the first resource I want to mention is Empress Atlantis, who has an asteroid directory. I think that's it. Did it work? It did. Yeah, I just put that in the chat. Empress Atlantis. They have a wider asteroid dictionary or directory, and they have little write-ups about many asteroids. So that's really fun to explore. And then the other one, Diana Rose Harper, they have a really great talk on Juno. And I put a lecture of theirs that's on Podia in the chat as well. I'll put that below. And they talk about Juno way beyond just marriage, which is usually what people look at with Juno. Definitely check that out. Those are the two things that I have. If anyone else has any cool asteroid resources, I mean, I think a lot of us have like Demetra George asteroid goddesses on our shelf. But yeah, for beyond that, if anyone has any cool resources, please put it in the chat. That would be super helpful. And thank you for the question. Let's see. Hello, Jandy. Hello, James. Check and check. I also got a question about Pluto. And this is, yeah, actually oh, and maybe one more thing about asteroids, just in case it's helpful. For anyone who has Astro Gold, I don't know how to do this on Astrofire or on Solar Fire or Luna. I'm sure there are ways. I imagine that they have, but make sure you check in your software's like extra preferences section. I don't know if y'all can see this, but you can look up like all kinds of stuff. Usually it's in like the back of the software. It's not in the front. So make sure if you do have any fancy software, you look to see if you can find asteroids in there. Otherwise, Astrodienst, like astro.com, they have them. That's a free website. And I want to also assume I have not fact checked this, but I'd be real surprised if AstroSeek did not have the asteroids. I'm sure they do. Peter's put everything on Um, okay. I think that's it for, yeah, for asteroids. Oh yeah, Pluto question. Okay. So thank you, Jennifer, for this question. The question was, are people who have Pluto natally in Libra, the Pluto and Libra generation, are they going to experience Pluto's Aquarius time differently than the Scorpio Pluto people? And short answer is yes, they will probably experience them differently. And this is where we want to look at, the houses involved between the natal Pluto position and the transiting Pluto. So look at what house topics are, whether it's your Libra or Scorpio. So look there, depending on where your Pluto is. And then look at Aquarius and see what house topics are involved there. That's thing one that's going to change, is just the areas of life that are being touched by Pluto. Thing two that you can look at is what kind of different aspects is Pluto making. I can't believe it. I can use the weeks button to get Pluto out of Capricorn. Sorry if you're fixed or anything. I'm Aquarius rising. I shouldn't be fist pumping for Pluto coming in. That should definitely not be happening. But, where'd my software go? So what kind of different aspects is Pluto going to be making once it gets into Aquarius that it wasn't making when it was in Capricorn? So let's say you've got a bunch of planets in Leo. When Pluto was in Capricorn, Pluto wasn't able to really interact with any kind of natal planets in Leo very easily. But now that Pluto is going to be in Aquarius, yep, they're going to be getting an opposition from Pluto. So look to see, where by aspects, so conjunction, sextile, square, trine, opposition. Check all of that. And then finally, just a general thing, just looking Pluto to Pluto. For people who have Pluto in Libra, you just got done with your Pluto square. You are going into your Pluto trine, your Pluto trine. So now transiting Pluto is having at least a sign-based, if not also a degree-based trine with your natal Pluto in Libra. And a trine is a more constructive relationship. It is a more free-flowing type of relationship. So, sometimes that can bid towards some intensity, but Pluto's already intense. Maybe it gets lost in the wash. I will say, though, that it's not like the Pluto problems go away. I don't think Pluto is going to enter Aquarius and all of a sudden, everything that happened with the topics of Capricorn are all like neat and tidy. But the Pluto problems are easier to deal with. There's more constructive stuff around those Pluto topics, the ability to turn lemons into lemonade. This is, I think, an upgrade. I think it's an improvement, in my own opinion. And you just got done with your Pluto square, which squares are usually harder. So congratulations, Pluto Libra people. You are finished with your Pluto square. I hope the next 20 years are easier for you. And now it's our turn. I have Pluto and Scorpio. It's square me. It's so if you need a guinea pig, if you need a barometer, if I lose my mind in the next 20 years or something, or if my career totally goes off the rails, that's probably Pluto. So that's kind of a weird way to keep people subscribing, but I guess, I don't know. We'll do what we need to do. But anyway, yeah, it's going to be a little harder. The nature of Mars is that of a square, or sorry, the nature of square is that of Mars. Mars is about change, conflict, tension. It is transformation. Before we had Pluto being Pluto, squares were really transformative. So now we're getting this transformative energy with with the most transformative planet in relation to itself. And what's also interesting is like the Hellenistic astrologers talked about squares being the most powerful, the most potent of all of the aspects, even compared to like the opposition. And they use the word, I think it's Dunistikos, meaning like relative, like roughly that's where we get words like potent or strong, basically. Uh, Squares are the strongest. And so we're getting this most potent type of aspect with planet that is very potent. So it's something. So yeah, that's that. That's I don't have I don't have I mean, and remember, everything is always context dependent. So if your Aquarius places, let's say it's been difficult, or maybe planets that you have in Aquarius have been having a rough time. If Pluto's going to come in and change stuff or transform things, it's kind of like, be my guest, bucko. I mean, I don't want to invite chaos, but yeah, those are my thoughts. Yeah, Jason, it's fixed stuff. Yeah, it's our turn now. The Cardinals get to rest. Although I have my sun in Capricorn, so like I've been doing this for a while. It's just going to be different and more loud and apparent to everybody else. Um, we have a question. I wonder if Pluto squaring natal Pluto from 1st to 10th could be read as alchemizing into a position of power by dissolving, confronting old aspects of the self. I mean, I hope so. I hope that would be great. I'm kind of like projecting it onto myself and thinking like, well, I am going to give up this pen name very soon. My pseudonym is going out the window as soon as I get a new solar return chart. And maybe it'll be a good thing. Maybe it's what's been holding me back this whole time. Uh, let's see. Laurent, another astrologer in the chat, check out their stuff. Is the Pluto square actually complete if it's still tightly aspected, like by degree? Yeah, this is a great caveat. Let's look at it. So what if you're someone who has a really late Libra Pluto? And then Pluto, it by transit gets into, okay, it's now a sign-based trine when Pluto gets into Aquarius, but by degree, it's pretty squarey. And this is where we get both and. You're probably still going to be feeling the crunch that the rest of us are going to be starting to feel with Pluto Scorpio. Yeah, you might still be feeling the lingering effects of the square a little into the sign-based trine. So I kind of layer those together. Very good question. Thank you for asking it. Yeah. Oh yeah. Saturn loves when we get tired of Saturning. That's their favorite. Okay. Let's do the next question. Similar to the asteroid question, not going to answer it fully here because I actually talked about it in September's Q&A about unaspected planets. I covered that more again, you can go back to September, those office hours, check out what I said about unaspected planets there. I have timestamps, so it should be pretty easy to find. But they had mentioned, and this is a word I've heard come up before with these kinds of things. And it's also a word I feel like I've seen in some of like the medieval astrologer, like the Persian astrologer books, the word feral to describe a planet that isn't in aspect with anything else. And I think that's a word that you can use. And at the same time, it implies a level of like chaos or unruliness that isn't, I think, the case all the time with an unaspected planet. Like, let's say you've got a really like dignified domiciled Venus and Taurus that's like unaspected. I don't know. It's like someone who's kind of lonely, but like making cute flower bouquets by themselves. They're not necessarily like feral. But there is this connotation of a planet that's unaspected is really doing things by themselves for better or for worse. They are not having connections with the other planets for better or for worse. They're not getting that positive testimony, but they're also not getting that negative testimony. So it really depends on the context, how like favorable, unfavorable that turns out. But yeah, definitely check out what I said in September. I give a little bit more on that. And thank you for that question, because it does happen. Let me check in with the chat. So we've got, what are my thoughts on malefic Mars in Leo? Day, sect, sun being afflicted. I mean, yeah, if you're a day chart, Mars is going to be more challenging. So, it depends where your sun is in your birth chart and where Mars is hitting that right now. For instance, my sun is in Capricorn. So right now, Mars is not hitting my sun, for instance. But I will say Mars in Leo, I mean, that's a spicy Mars, fire, any Mars in a fire sign. Mars in a fire sign, Aries, Sagittarius, Leo. It's like action in a place that wants to act. It's like double action. So it's really expressive. People who have Mars and Leo, they can have a desire, even if maybe if it's only with a few, close people, there can be a lot of expressiveness that comes out. So some people call it spicy. Some people might call it, just very like animated or expressive. I think what we can also do is look at like what part of Leo is Mars going to be in, because the story is going to shift a bit as Mars gets influenced by, say, its bound lord and its decan lord. Mars doesn't have a ton of dignity in Leo. They don't like being in fire. They don't like being in, they don't like being in a daytime sign because they're a nighttime. They're a night sect planet. I forgot to mention that planets have sect. It's Sun, Jupiter, Saturn for the daytime team, and Venus, Mars, Moon. So Mars doesn't love to be in a daytime sign. I mean, the good news is right now we've got this beautiful mutual reception. So there's a lot of functionality that is here, especially between like the Leo and the Scorpio house topics. Mars is going to be pretty muted, I think, these first bits of Leo, but and the thing is like the parts of Leo where Mars gets the spiciest, which is the end of Leo, like the last 10 degrees, but especially maybe like those last 6 or 7 where you're in Mars is bound as well. Uh, that's going to be the spiciest, and we're not seeing that this year. Mars is putting it in reverse on the 6th or at 6 degrees of Leo. They're not going to make it to that spicy part. So I think, Mars right now, I don't know, I use it as energy, use it as fuel, and be discerning about where you put that energy. I would say try to connect the topics of the Leo house and the Scorpio house. Try to connect those life topics and see how much stuff you can get done. That's what I'm doing with it. But yeah, great question. Yeah. Easy brings up a good point too with the word feral. It is linked with animals that are usually violent. So yeah, kind of like wild animals. Um, I mean, sometimes, if you have a Mars that is unaspected and that Mars is doing whatever it wants, not held in by like the comforting beams of like a Saturn trine, yeah, that's going to be a spicy Mars. So in that case, I might use a word like feral, but yeah, it really it depends. But I think also just like the wildness. And that does kind of track in its own sense of the isolation that we also kind of conflate with wildness. Yeah, or far awayness. That would track with a unaspected planet. Yeah, good stuff. And the words really matter. When we look at the traditions of astrology in the past, and anytime one tradition was being translated into the next, or translated from one language into the next, the astrologers of ancient times were very careful and very particular about the words that they chose to translate like astrological things into their into the new language that it was going to be in. So it's really good to think about the words and be careful about the words. Um, so yeah, thanks for that question. It's like it's good. Even when you think like it could be a simple thing, there's usually a lot to it. Uh, so let's talk about void of course moons. Speaking of things that should be simple, but there's a lot to it. Let's talk about void of course moons. So this was a really good one. Thank you, Easy, for that. I did actually have to research this one a bit because horary astrology is not my first one. It is not my first astrology. And it'll probably be my last because it intimidates the heck out of me. I have definitely gotten my fill of giving people really heavy information that is pretty black and white. I've done enough of that for several lifetimes now, which I feel like that's what horary is. Like people are coming to you. It's interrogational astrology. It's the astrology of questions. You ask a question. It's really good for like yes or no questions, or like, if I do this, how is it going to turn out? It can be very stark, and it's purely divination. You basically cast a chart for the time of the question. It's pretty cool. So, if someone asked if I was a horary astrologer, I would get an email with a question from a client. And at that time that I read that question, that's when I'm going to cast a chart for it. And then I read it. And it's like divination. It is divination. And you get an answer. So we can look at void of course moon in a natal chart. We can look at it in an electional chart. We can look at it with horary and a horary question. And honestly, there's a lot of similarities. We can treat it pretty much the same across all of those, natal, electional, horary. But I will say some specific things about horary. I'm going to just say a little bit about each of them. Excuse me. I want to say a little bit about each of them. And then, yeah. And then too, I am going to put some links because we need links. So thank you, Chris Brennan, for the, it's too long. The astrology dictionary. It won't let me put the link in. I need to make one of those tiny links. It's too long of a link. Go to the astrology dictionary and look up void of course moon. It'll come up. There's 3 definitions. They're different depending on like the era of astrology. So for instance, we're going to have one coming up this March. What is this? Like March 10th or something. No, let me look it up. So I'll say what a void of course moon is in the meantime. It is a moon that is not aspected to any planets. So speaking of unaspected planets, it's when the moon is unaspected. That's a void of course moon. And AstroSeek has a really great void of course moon calculator that I'm always talking about. Now the Hellenistic grade ones, they're like industrial strength grade. There, I just put the AstroSeek void of course moon calculator in the chat. The Hellenistic ones are like they're bigger and stronger and longer. So it's when the moon doesn't make an aspect within 30 degrees across sign boundary. So if that moon is going and it's not meeting any other planets by any aspects or conjunction within the next 30 degrees, then that's going to be a void of course moon by the Hellenistic standard. It's really rare. It doesn't happen all the time. I'm trying to hold up 1 second. Trying to show you this calculator. Okay, here we go. So here's the dates for all of the ones for next year. It's really interesting because they're all happening in March. Usually we only have 2 or 3 of these Hellenistic grade ones. They're not that common because, yeah, it's really rare that the moon doesn't aspect anything else within 30 degrees across sign boundary. A lot of the medieval definitions, they say when the moon isn't making an aspect, let's say one of the definitions is within 12 to 13 degrees. When the moon isn't making an aspect within its daily range of motion, about 12 or 13 degrees, up till the next sign boundary, or through the next sign boundary, sorry, not counting sign boundary. So then it's like that 30 degrees gets shrunk to like 12 or 13. So then that's a different definition. If then the Renaissance, their definition, that one happens much more commonly. That's if the moon isn't going to make an aspect before it leaves the sign. So it's like the game board resets when the moon changes into the next sign. And that is a definition that was in the medieval and the Renaissance tradition. So it depends on what time era you're looking at, which void of course moon definition you're using. They're all great. And I kind of see them and I've observed them as kind of different strengths or potencies. So yeah, it's a pretty big deal if the moon's not making any connection for 30 degrees. And I really love what Demetra George says about it on page 325 of Ancient Astrology, Volume 1. This one, this book. She talks about void of course moons actually being, you know, they're not a time where material things are going to turn out. When the moon isn't connecting with other planets, it's like the ability of things to happen down here, you know, as above, so below, as above. It's harder for the moon to make things happen. In a hermetic sense, it's harder for the moon to transmit the effluences of the other planets down here to us. And so doing material world stuff like hunting, planting, fishing, cooking, taking care of the material business of the day, you know, doing a project at work, making the cake, it's not going to look like the picture. So that's what I always say about void of course moons. That's my like little tagline. Don't make the cake, not going to look like the picture. It's an easy way to remember it, you know. But what it is good for, it's kind of this in-betweeny time where the moon can be relatively unbothered by by the other planets. And so when I want to actually just read it verbatim because I tend to mess these things up when I try to just remember them. Okay. Yeah. It's at the bottom of the page. When the moon is void, she herself is inactive and aimless in terms of ordinary, everyday life matters, which can result in loss, decrease, and emptiness. However, in terms of non-ordinary states of awareness, the moon has a capacity to travel in the subtle realms of consciousness and survey the mysteries. That's from Demetra George. So we meditate and we do all of our spiritual stuff and we do non-material world things, but we don't expect material world things to pan out very well. So that's the general notion. I'm going to not try to find it on the wheel, sorry. But you saw the Astro Seek dates. You can go look at it if you want to, and you'll see the moon is going to be not making any aspects with planets. So yeah, if you see that in a birth chart, a lot of the ancient authors talked about it symbolizing someone who's going to have a hard time doing things of material prominence in the world, you know, or being an eminent person in the world. It's going to be tougher for them unless there's other mitigating factors in the chart that help out, like Jupiter on the ascendant or something like that. In electional astrology, I'm going to avoid it like the plague. I'm going to avoid void of course moons. I don't want to see it in my electional chart unless I'm electing for something to not happen. So the classic one that I hear from astrologers is they will like send in something like to their taxes so they won't get audited. You know, like you send a thing in and nothing will come of it. That's what they always say, nothing will come of it. In Greek, the word kenodromia, running in the void, a fruitless course, an empty race, a fruitless race. All of those words are all provocative of like, yeah, not a lot, it's empty, it's fruitless, it's not going to turn out. So finally, to get to the main answer, in horary charts, the two things to consider here are, okay, what does that moon signify? Because the moon can be a general significator in a horary chart, but it's not always the main significator that you're looking for. Say if you're looking at the horary chart and it is, well, maybe this is a bad example because it's Cancer rising, but if you were looking at something like money, I'd be looking at the sun, you know, and then I would see how the sun is, not necessarily the moon. So, well, a void of course moon is not usually great in any context. And I think we can carry that over as well into horary astrology. I don't think it bodes well, depending on the question. If you want, like if it's someone like a romantic question and you want something to come about, a void of course moon doesn't look good for someone, right? But the other point is that you got to look at the other significators too. And it's not necessarily going to be the deal breaker, depending on what question you're asking and what that chart is about. It may not be the star of the show, so to speak. So, as far as technique to use, that's up to you. You can choose to be just like strictly Hellenistic and watch that. You can choose to watch, okay, moon not making any aspects within 12 to 13 degrees, or moon not making any aspects before a sign boundary. You can see if sign boundaries matter or not. And then just know that that's based on the different periods of astrology that we had and the development of that technique through the ages. And yeah, it's not always a bad thing, but like most people are trying to figure out how to navigate material life. So most of the time it's going to be difficult. But yeah, like I guess last thing I'll say about it. So then NPS, like naming my teachers on this, Chris Brennan, um, on the Heavenly Spheres by Luis Ribeiro and Elena Avelar. That book is good. And Chris Brennan and Rob Bailey. Yeah. Rob Bailey, Chris Brennan, their horary course. That's where I brushed up on that because I tried to take it and I was just really bad at it. So I kind of just like left it at the wayside, but I reviewed some information. So this is where that's coming from. But in a horary chart, uh, if you see a void of course moon, yeah, it's not a good, it kind of leans toward no, or nothing is going to come of it. It's fruitless. It's those words, fruitless, void of course, empty course. That kind of describes maybe the outcome, right? So that's what I have to say about void of course moons. Um, there's a lot to love. Let me see if anyone has any questions. I'm not seeing any. Okay. I think I have a philosophical corner. Oh, I did want to do one cute one. Um, I don't know if anyone watched the Olympics, but I'm going to bring up his chart. Noah Lyles. Did anyone watch the track and field of the Olympics? So this is an athlete. Their name is Noah Lyles, and they were very cute. And they were doing track and field, and they had pearls in their hair, which is why I'm using the word cute, because it was literally like, wow, that is beautiful. Why do you have pearls in your hair? It was awesome. And then there was also this really sweet report that after he won his race, he like went and hugged his mom. And it's like, yeah, a lot of athletes go and like hug their mom or dad after their event, but there was something about that. And then there was a little interview blip with like um, his mom talking about him and his struggles with health and with athleticism and how he's like broken through all of this struggle and just come out as an Olympian. So really beautiful story about Noah Lyles. So I saw pearls in his hair and I was immediately like, all right, what's this guy's cancer placement? Because cancer is pearls. And yeah, they're a cancer sun. And then all the stuff about moms. And like, I don't, this is not a timed chart. I think I just like guessed about this. But we do have the day. We do not have the time. So yeah, that was a really fun example of just, if you see something like that where you're like, you know what, I wonder, look it up, see if it works. A lot of times it does. And then my last thing I want to cover today, and this is actually a philosophical corner thing. Um, and this, it kind of spurred a little bit of a Dharma thought trail. Actually, you know what? Before I do that, I'm going to do one more fun thing because it's short and it's quick. And then we'll we'll have philosophical Dharma time. Uh, so this was new to me. And of course, last call, if anyone has any questions, this is the time. So there was this politician named Dean Howard way back. And now I think we do. It's Howard Dean. Hold on. Here we go. Howard Dean was a politician. And he was active. I want to say it was like 90s. Yeah, because this is from 2004. So there's a politician named Howard Dean, and he was on a campaign doing his thing. And then there was this one rally where I don't know what he was talking about. It doesn't matter, but he was trying to get the crowd really like revved up, and he was really revved up, very amped up, very excited, very enthusiastic. And he made this like whooping kind of scream noise, very out of like enthusiasm, you know? Um, and it was titled The Dean Scream, and it was really funny. Like you should definitely Google it. Google Dean Scream. It's hilarious. It takes like 5 seconds. And I felt kind of bad because we're totally making fun of this man right now. But the astrology was just so good because I looked up, I was like, well, what in the heck was going on in the sky when this thing happens that goes viral? This guy's like embarrassing scream. It goes viral. And he pretty much it tanks his campaign. Like his campaign pretty much ended after that because it became viral and it was like this gaffe kind of thing. So kind of a bummer because like it was probably super unnecessary and like just, you know, people being people and being rude. And now I'm being one of them by bringing it up again. However, it's like, what was the sky when that happened, right? So before I had seen his birth chart, I actually just looked up when that rally was that this scream occurred at. And this is a guess. I don't know if the rally was at 12 p.m. It might have been later. I kind of feel like it might have been later, but I don't really think it matters that much because Mercury is at 5 degrees on January 19th of 2004, the day of the Dean Scream. And they were running right into, it was a double application to a retrograde Saturn, Lord of Rejection. So we've got Mercury being voice, talking, speaking, and Saturn being the Lord of Rejection. And I know that there's Venus intervening. You know, he was trying to be charming. He was trying to be funny and unique and, you know, being just fun. That's Pisces in general. But yeah, Saturn was not having any of it, you know? Uh, the moon was right there. It was kind of about ready to run right into and then activate and ping this Mercury Saturn opposition. And then when we do look at that up against his birth chart, then we can see, oh, it's happening across his place of self and other. So he's here trying to speak to the other. And there's a lot of no, a lot of rejection, a lot of criticism and critique coming on to himself here based on that. Mars isn't doing any favors in the 10th. Granted, he's a night baby, so it's probably fine. But yeah, I think the more important thing, definitely this opposition here. So that was just really vivid. Wanted to share that. Talking rejection. Someone's campaign died because he screamed wrong. It's like, okay. So yeah, I want to share that. That was just a really silly example, really good one. Let me see if there's any final questions. I don't think there is. So let's go over to the philosophical corner. All right. And hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. If you're enjoying this, I got a heartfelt question from someone bringing up, yeah, I think something that we're all thinking about in terms of what do we do, any glimmers of hope after the sad US election. And yeah, I was like, you know what, let's just talk about it because it was very sad indeed. And I guess I don't really need this guy to talk about this. I mean, I could. No, actually, I couldn't. I wouldn't even know where to begin. Um, oop. Oh, what happened to my, oh, hold please. My microphone switched. There we go. We got her back. Because I bumped it. It's getting a little dicey here, technologically speaking. Okay. So philosophical corner. Um, any glimmers of hope? And I just wanted to talk about, what to do when, yeah, it's like, okay, there's a lot of social stuff, a lot of social situations that are not great in my country and a lot of countries in a lot of different ways. And this election was disappointing for a lot of us because I think we were hoping to start to get progress made in some really critical directions. And that goes for here in places like, say, Flint, Michigan, and abroad in places like Gaza and Palestine and Ukraine and all of the places that are just getting messed with right now. Um, so yeah, I think we all wanted to see, well, not all of us clearly. I think a lot of us wanted to see progress with some of those topics of just like the social structure, the support network here, the material support network in this country. And yeah, that's not going to happen now, at least not the way we thought. And I forget now where this is coming from. I didn't plan to say this, but there was a really good reframing. Uh, and I got this from on Threads. The handle is Tay Boutte. They're like a trainer. I love their handle. But Tay Boutte shared this thing about how, when you vote in an election in America, at least, or in the USA, how we have it running, you're kind of voting for if you're a radical person, you're kind of voting for your opponent because the president is not your friend usually. They're kind of the commander in chief. They're like head of the military. Like, meh, it's a little, for me, it's a little like, I don't love it. Um, so you're voting for your opponent. So we did not get the opponent that we wanted. We got the hard boss, unfortunately, for this last round. Hopefully it's the last round. Hopefully he doesn't become some kind of autocratic dictator. Um, dang it, I touched it again. I gotta stop touching my microphone. So a couple glimmers of hope. Our own agency, our own actions. So anytime I am feeling doubtful or weak or hopeless, I feel like the antidote sometimes is just doing something, not unskillfully at all, being discerning, not being reactive, and so that you can place your energy in a really skillful direction so that we can do this long game, because this is a very long game. Um, but taking some kind of action. And that can be personal actions for yourself in healing any self-loathing, healing any self-hatred, healing hypercriticism that goes beyond what is necessary, shame, dealing with any of that stuff. It starts to help everything so that we all have the ability to do that. We all have the capacity to improve in any of those internal factors of patience, love, loving kindness, goodwill, practicing this idea that, there's this belief that, you believe everyone really wants to be happy, everyone wants to be healthy, safe, and just that belief, remembering that everyone wants to be happy, everyone wants to be healthy, and working on yourself if you need to. That's step one, in a lot of ways. The thing is we can do more than one step at a time. You don't have to do this stepwise linear thing. You don't have to be fixed in order to help things externally either. So that's, of course, the other huge pasture field of action and agency taking in terms of doing the same stuff we've been doing in a lot of ways, but just keeping intentionally doing that, like mutual aid, helping your community, being part of a community. A lot of people have been saying this stuff online. So I'm repeating some things I'm hearing too in terms of just like, yeah, part of this work is just like connecting with each other, connecting with community so that we can continue to work together on stuff and not tear each other apart with blame and shame and these things that like science has shown us now. Like brains don't learn when they're in shame. They just don't. Um, in Buddhism, shame can be a helpful thing in terms of preventing regrettable action. You can use shame to say, hey, that might be a bad thing to do. That might not turn out so well for me. And I might feel embarrassed. So maybe I won't do it. That's like when shame is coming in as a protective mechanism to protect that thing from happening again or from ever happening. Um, but to use it as a self-flagellatory mechanism or a punitive thing, which in America, we're a very punitive culture. So blame and shame is like the first place we go, and we want to find like one person who's at fault or two or three people who are at fault. Or we put that fault on ourselves, and through that shame and guilt, we think we're going to change, but actually it keeps our brains from learning and doing better. So working on your own stuff, that's a place of agency. Working on connecting with community, mutual aid, all the stuff we've all been doing, continuing to do that, that's the place of agency. And in that agency, I think that's where we get those, we really we fan the flames of hope. And I feel like there was one other thing. Yeah. So, I mean, this is kind of getting a little broader. Uh, but what was the broad thing? Yeah, this kind of, okay, because there's the topic of like the election and racism in America. And there's also this topic of like these new age movements. And a lot of the new age movements kind of co-opting some spiritual language that leads to like some really harmful misunderstandings and distortions that end up really harming people. So I wanted to also bring this into the philosophical corner because trust me, till the end of the journey, it'll tie into how do I respond to the sadness and the grief of the results of what our country is showing us it is. It was a democratically won election. It was not, it was by popular vote, unfortunately. And, I think one thing to consider is that there's a lot of, and this is where the co-opting of spiritual views into distortions, such as everyone is the inheritor of their own karma. Everyone is the inheritor of the consequences of their own actions. And that is something that comes from, it's in Buddhism, everyone is the inheritor of their own karma, but it was never meant to be taken as a standalone idea that basically people have taken to mean, oh, other people suffer, none of my business. I don't have to help. I don't have to do anything about that. They must have done something in a past life. Who am I to intervene? Maybe they need to learn a lesson. Like I've heard very spiritual, self-described spiritual people saying these things. And the thing is that kind of line about responsible accountability, basically, it was never meant to be taken by itself. It was always meant to be undergirded by goodwill, an inherent wishing of safety and wealth, or sorry, safety and health toward others, like wanting others to be okay, realizing that we all want peace, safety, happiness, and wanting other people to also have peace, safety, and happiness. And then also compassion that was meant to be undergirded by compassion, seeing suffering clearly and feeling moved to do something about it. And then after those things, after love, goodwill, compassion, then you know to help and you can discern about how to help in the most skillful way. And at this point, then the helpful notion of, okay, accountability comes in. They are still the inheritors of their karma. And so it helps us to let go of what's not ours to carry, to say, okay, I did what I can do to help. That makes the most sense and is the most skillful so that I can help for the longest for the most people. Like, how do I help the most skillfully? And then let go of that, not because I don't care, not because I'm not invested in seeing them through to the end, but to just let go and say it's not, the outcome is now out of my hands. So this idea of everyone is the inheritor of their own actions or whatever, yeah, but it was never meant to just be taken as, oh, I can be indifferent and apathetic and not worry about good or evil and not worry about, whatever, because it doesn't work like that. So I just, I think in America, we want to just like blame each other and shame each other right now and be like, oh, and these people who voted for that guy, let them have their problems, and yeah, and it's just like, yeah, no, it makes sense. Like it's part of the grieving process. But as long as this is not where we're ending up, I think that is also really, really important to note. slash if you're hearing that kind of indifference and apathy being co-opted and bastardized, being bastardized versions of like spirituality elsewhere, just know about it, you know. Uh, yeah, we were never meant to just be apathetic. That was never the thing. So I guess that is pretty much, I'll say some more stuff next time about this because it's not like these things are changing anytime soon. Because I also wanted to talk about bias and I mean, clearly lifelong sport, work in progress with working with our internal inherent biases. Um, but just a great, you know, reminder, there's always a great time. And one book that I have on my list, I just took a workshop from Sharon Salzberg and Anu Gupta. Um, Gupta has a book on breaking bias that is on my list to read, but I mean, the workshop that they gave was incredible, and it gave so many just clear instructions on how to not look through your own biases and really just see them and examine them and hold space for them and not, you know, don't get hard on yourself. But yeah, I think that's what I'll talk about a little bit next time is just what I learned from that workshop in a nutshell kind of version about how to look at our biases because it's hard. It's all the stuff is very deeply conditioned and we have to unlearn stuff. So we'll talk about ways of unlearning stuff next time. But I'll leave it there. So agency, doing things, whether it's improving your love for yourself or acting out that love for others. Of course, money always helps. Everyone knows that. Send your money to the right place. Those are my glimmers of hope is action, basically. So, yeah. And there's, I guess, last thing on that, you know, in one way that, and this comes from pharmacy, like these are the things that I would tell myself for sanity's sake. But when you see people that you think are confused, remember that they're confused and that confusion is a state of suffering. Misunderstanding is a state of suffering. It's not, and people might not recognize that. They might, and how many times in my own life have I, one, not even known that I was confused? Like when I thought astrology was fake news, I was very confused. And I didn't know that confusion was suffering outside of just the feeling of uncertainty. But if you don't even know you're confused, you might not even feel, someone might be like, oh, you can't say that to people. You can't be like, oh, you're suffering, you're confused. But it is true that, you know, not to get preachy, but like just to make it really simple, like the things that we're trying to be aware of and watch out for and notice are greed, delusion, and hatred. So greed and hatred are pretty easy to see. The delusion part, misunderstanding, confusion, not seeing things clearly, that is like the third big state of suffering. So hatred is a state of suffering. It's all states of suffering, even if people are feeling the energy of the power or the allure of the lust or whatever is going on toward whatever candidate. You know, it's like a lot of this stuff, like just remember that people are not, these are not happy places to be. So if we can be kind and patient to each other, I know there's always last thing I'll say, because now I'm on a soapbox, because I'm thinking of all the things I've been seeing on the internet since the election results. And it comes up every time, this discussion about burning bridges or not. And that's up to you because only you know what's safe for you. Only you know your capacity at any given moment and what is just safe or not. But I've had, not to brag or anything, but just to like inspire and say it's possible. Like I've had relationships where I've known people who have very different views than me that I find very offensive, and I've hung in there and watched them come around. So it takes so much time and patience. And again, it really greatly depends, but especially if you're someone who looks like me and is a person of privilege, one way to leverage that privilege is to, I think, to deal with some of these more difficult relationships where there are differing values or differing understandings and not cutting people off because how are they going to learn from me if we're not in connection? How are they going to get any different perspective at all if we're not talking? So, um, easier said than done. You know, user discretion advised. Your mileage may vary, and Yeah, it's up to you. It's only up to you. So don't let other people judge you also for your decisions because they don't know your life either. So don't judge each other online for what people are doing there unless you're talking to them and asking them questions about why did you do that or not. But yeah, if we can, I really encourage us to hang in there for the long game on all this stuff. So those are my glimmers of hope. Okay. Yay, we did it. No more door solicitors. No more solicitors at my door. Ranked choice voting. Let me just get all my politics out right now. Ranked choice voting if you're in the United States. We need to do the ranked choice voting. Hell, if you're in a different country, you guys too. Let's the whole world, ranked choice voting. This is getting ridiculous. Like how many, every 4 years are we going to keep doing this? This two-party thing. Come on, y'all. Like there's other ways. Maine is doing it. Maine has started to do it. People are doing it. Okay, I have to go. I actually want to stay and hang out, but I actually have to go do a thing. Thank you everyone so much. I appreciate you. If you're watching this a little later, I mean, tonight, as of the 14th, I still need to do the timestamps and get some links down there. So I'm sorry if the links I had mentioned are not down there yet, but come back like tomorrow and they'll be there. But yeah, just thank you everyone for your time, your energy, and your patience and listening to me on my soapbox. And thank you for all of your questions and everything. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, get a booking, www.alignasteastrology.com. If you like how I talk about things, we can read together and it'll probably be really fun or very insightful or both. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care.